Alright, good. Well, I did hit the button in time. Oh, yeah, I still have Tom Ben News up there. Alright. It's time for part 2 of our weekly test show. Yeah, came back much later. Again, the lecture was quite long, but we're back. However, I'm going to take a little snack break here before we even get any further, so I know we're probably going to be a little late to get into the word game. So, if Brendan's up for Deal or No Deal tonight, great. We'll do that, and then we will take care of the word game afterwards. So that's the plan. But if not, then we'll just do the word game. All right. Let's see. I've got another one I'd like to try. So what we're going to try now, no, not pitch and speed. What is it? S to split? Split clip, Control I. Here we go. So we're going to try the the old Weather Radio Canada test message next. So let's bring Talking Ginger back. And let's just get right to it.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your allergic with Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis tous les mercredis midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your allergic with Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test sur Radio Météo Canada.
Let's try a little faster.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your allergic with Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis tous les mercredis midi sur Radio Météo Canada.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your allergic with Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis tous les mercredis midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ceci est un message test émis tous les mercredis midi sur Radio Météo Canada.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your allergic with Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your allergic with Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis tous les mercredis midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your allergic with Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis tous les mercredis midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your allergic with Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis tous les mercredis midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your allergic with Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis tous les mercredis midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your allergic with Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis tous les mercredis midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
Weekly test of your allergic with Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis tous les mercredis midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your Alert Equipment Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your Alert Equipment Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your Alert Equipment Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your Alert Equipment Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your Alert Equipment Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your Alert Equipment Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your Alert Equipment Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your Alert Equipment Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your Alert Equipment Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your Alert Equipment Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your Alert Equipment Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your Alert Equipment Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your Alert Equipment Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your Alert Equipment Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs radio.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your Alert Equipment Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your Alert Equipment Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your Alert Equipment Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions fonction d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs radio météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your alert equipped weather radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs radio météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your alert equipped weather radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs radio météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your alert equipped weather radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs radio météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your alert equipped weather radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs radio météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your alert equipped weather radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs radio météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your alert equipped weather radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs radio météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your alert equipped weather radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs radio météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your alert equipped weather radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs radio météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your alert equipped weather radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs radio météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your alert equipped weather radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs radio météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your alert equipped weather radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs radio météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your alert equipped weather radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs radio météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your alert equipped weather radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs radio météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your alert equipped weather radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs radio météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your alert equipped weather radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs radio météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your alert equipped weather radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message test émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs radio météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your Alert Equipment Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message testé émis tous les mercredis midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your Alert Equipment Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message testé émis tous les mercredis midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your Alert Equipment Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message testé émis tous les mercredis midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your Alert Equipment Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message testé émis tous les mercredis midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your Alert Equipment Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message testé émis tous les mercredis midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your Alert Equipment Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message testé émis tous les mercredis midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message testé émis tous les mercredis midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your Alert Equipment Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message testé émis tous les mercredis midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your Alert Equipment Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message testé émis tous les mercredis midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your Alert Equipment Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message testé émis tous les mercredis midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your Alert Equipment Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message testé émis tous les mercredis midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your Alert Equipment Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message testé émis tous les mercredis midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your Alert Equipment Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message testé émis tous les mercredis midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your Alert Equipment Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message testé émis tous les mercredis midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your Alert Equipment Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message testé émis tous les mercredis midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your Alert Equipment Weather Radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message testé émis tous les mercredis midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your allergic with this weather radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message testé émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your allergic with this weather radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your allergic with this weather radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message testé émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your allergic with this weather radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message testé émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your allergic with this weather radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message testé émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your allergic with this weather radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message testé émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your allergic with this weather radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message testé émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your allergic with this weather radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message testé émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
That's great. Talking Ginger and Tom and Ben repeating the test message. That's lovely.
You are listening to Weather Radio Canada's weekly test of your allergic with this weather radio, broadcast every Wednesday near noon. Ceci est un message testé émis mercredi midi sur Radio Météo Canada. Ce message est destiné à tester les fonctions d'activation d'alarme et d'affichage des nouveaux récepteurs Radio Météo.
Also, one more thing I want to try with these. Oh gosh. Oh no. Oh no. Oh my gosh. This is already great. Every time I try to record this, I just can't get enough of how great this sounds. One more time. That's great. How those things react. Ah, jeez. Okay. Well, now that we're done with that, we are going to go right ahead and get to the... We're going to go ahead and get to the word game because we were going to do it earlier, and I haven't even ported over the list from last week. Ah, darn. Okay. So here we go. Let's try to see what kind of crazy words we can make from these 11 letters. V, S, H, O, I, E, S, M, not N, C, U, I. I wonder what kind of crazy words can we make from these? Yeah, the cat are eating the dog. I already love that. Okay. How much time will we get before Brandon tells us that he's up for Deal or No Deal? Let's see. Let's see. First word. Home. SCUIESV. Oh yeah, it looks like they really put me up to a challenge. They really stepped me up to a challenge. Oh yeah, here I'll move the window over a little bit so you can see all three of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelists icons on the desktop on the virtual machine, including Yugi. Yeah, Yugi. Okay. All right, let's try another one. How about shove? Shoves MICIU. um. This is already as weird as it is. Let's try. I mean, there's that one more. How about SHIOMCESVUI? Let's see what else we can think of here. How about HOOVE? Oh wait, no, there's only one O there. How about HOVE SMIVIC? Hovsmivik. Let's see. I see Drew returned after we went off the air. That's yeah. We had already ended part 1 by then. All right, let me get. Let's see here. Okay, I see an offline status, so that probably tells me that he is unavailable to do Deal or No Deal this week. I'll keep it open just in case. But whatever he's doing, I'm not going to bother wasting his time. And if the Lembine's busy tonight, I am not going to bother wasting his time either. So, let's just roll on here. And then we'll do the eBay scavenger hunt afterwards. And also, before we proceed, I changed my mind on Hollywood Squares. I've decided I'm going to wait on that until when I get to the catch-up process with the other shows tomorrow. So, that would be tonight's Flip Side, tonight's Perfect Line, alongside a few others of those. There is supposed to be a new episode of Scrambled Up tomorrow morning. I checked the schedule. So I'll take care of that, as well as the Hollywood Squares episode that aired tonight, that actually just finished here in Chicago on CBS. But I'm not staying up past 12:30 just to wait for it to air on Los Angeles, on LA's CBS over in the Pacific time zone. So I'm just gonna wait till tomorrow to watch it. And besides, my parents don't even care for it anyway. But for what reason? I don't know. Let's see. Let's try SMUC EIOHSI. Oh boy. Yeah, I think that's all I can. That's really all I can think of here for this week's word game. Now, also, let me find the other document. Wait, no, not there. Undo. Okay. I want to copy it to the root of that network drive. So then I can go over here, and I'm going to carry over the words from. No. Yeah, get rid of it. We're not making 5th grader anymore. after that. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and put in the list from last week. There we are. And this was the description from the final episode, from what would probably be the last episode of the end of Weather Radio Canada. So that is that then, I guess. And I did check the Canada transmitters status, and in fact they're all still broadcasting as far as I've heard. So I can go over and check.
Pressure 30.16 inches in
Météo. Vous téléchargez l'application mobile Météo 4 pour obtenir votre information météorologique.
So here's Edmonton still operating.
Weather Radio and Hello Weather are no longer in service.
7733.
There's Calgary still running.
Time is Wednesday, March 18th.
And then here's Collingwood.
Next up, J225.
And then here's Toronto. Boy, I wonder what all these Canadians are going to do.
Comments should be directed to 1-877-789-7733.
I'm pretty sure when an event similar to what happened in Oklahoma and just recently in Lake Village, Indiana, and then eventually the city of Knox, Indiana, I'm pretty sure whoever made that decision to shut off Weather Radio Canada is going to be very, very sorry that they did. They're going to be very sorry that they made that choice. That they made that terrible of a choice. All right. I want to go take care of something really quickly here before we continue. Okay, so, let's see. Before we continue here, I don't know if Brownsville ever tested. I'm assuming they had, like, technical problems or something. Yeah, I assume they had technical problems. Now, we didn't even go back on anything else, so let's do that while we're here. So here's let's see, this is the Tampa evening test that did not go through because the Tampa Bay stream was down. And of course, I didn't even have my SDR running, because I was already on my way by the time it was sent out. The fire warning from earlier. So we got the evening test, And then he also got the morning test, like I did. In fact, I almost missed it. I honestly almost missed it because the Tampa Bay stream I had in there was down. Because the Tampa stream I had on my logger was down. Thankfully, no, I didn't have. Well, I did have a Miami stream being monitored on my SDR thing. And what was that? It was just some other stuff. And then Saratoga County's dog apparently activated his fire alarm system. And then he did his weekly fire alarm test afterwards. And then we go over to Chaos MOX, who got the Lincoln Weekly on 2 different Lincoln transmitters. And then he uploaded everything from March 15th, which was the, I believe that was the enhanced risk. And that was the afternoon test that TFM uploaded here. And what do we have here? And showing more of these videos of stray cats. And how he's taking very good care of them in almost every possible way. And then over here. Oh. So I see he has quite a setup going. And then he has weather radio. For what? Yep. Oh, that's right. He has a Sentry in where outside his garage. So that's probably why he had those headphones in his hand. So, yeah. And is that Windows 10? I see. So the Ohio Monthly went out first, and then the drill right at 9:50 a.m. Eastern Time. Wow, that still is a pretty huge collection. It looks like he was home for it. Oh, I see. My God, that siren is so loud I can barely hear. I can't even hear the radio broadcast at all.
This is a test. Repeating.
That's another angle. CXP got the 6 p.m. evening test from home. And then Center PA. Yeah, that was the Ohio tornado drill from earlier. He got the morning test from Miami. What was his reaction? And this was his reaction when he found out that they did live voice.
This is a test of the NOAA weather radio warning device. During potentially dangerous weather situations, especially if receivers are automatically.
Oh yeah, so he had Tampa and Miami both in one video, in one clip. Because right after Miami tested, Tampa went. And there was all the other stuff from earlier. A new song by Savage. And the stuff from February, late February and into early March. the weeklies from today. Oh, he managed to pick up Jackson, Kentucky. All the way from there? Oh, right. There was one in, oh, that's right. This is different.
Graham, Jackson, Bacon, and Swain. This concludes the NOAA Weather Radio. All hazards.
And here was the second Wilmington test. And this is because of the Kentucky counties. As I stated earlier, they could have just sent the second test over the transmitters that serve Kentucky and Indiana. And of course Dayton was one of them. They could have just shortened the county coverage down to just Indiana or Kentucky. Only mention the Kentucky counties and not the entire transmitter coverage area. They could have just done that, but I mean that's something that would be difficult to change. And then that was the Ohio tornado drill. Again, the Lembine got the drill today.
I don't think they can't pull them while they're middle of.
He got it on NOAA Weather Radio. Well, I know it's one of those Grand Rapids transmitters, so. And then that was a warning from March 15th. And then Yoshi Fan got the weekly test with a first alert SFA 1135.
While they're testing Sterling Village, it's for now, Drew. While they're testing Sterling Village, it's for now, Drew.
Well, that's Parker.
You're listening to NOAA Weather Radio in Parker, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, let's talk about Pittsburgh, because the majority of the county coverage for Pittsburgh is Pennsylvania, and Parker serves Pennsylvania. Although Pittsburgh does serve a few counties in Ohio and West Virginia. So, yeah, that's why Pittsburgh still ended up testing. But of course, every other transmitter as such. As such. All right. Now, a few more things here. I don't think there was any confirmation as to whether Boston tested or any of the others. Let's see. It was just Melbourne, Brownsville, and Boston. So what I'll do is I guess Chevier. I don't know if Chevier ever got, but I think because of his college class and whatever, yeah, there's really no way we can confirm that Boston tested. So, assuming that there was no severe weather in Boston, I'm going to assume that they tested. But the loggers that WJON and I had in there never activated, or the stations never even activated in the first place. Melbourne, same story. Again, I don't know why. So, by rule, I'm going to have those three transmitters going. I'm going to have those three stations running. See if they ever make their, see if they end up making their test up. And I don't think we got any other Chicago tests. Yeah, I don't think we did. All right. So then I'll go ahead and pull up the Thursday stuff. Here we go. So this is the Thursday automated test. And another thing is I'm going to put on my SDR again, but this time I'm going to leave the Cox logger running. I'm going to leave the Cox logger running because, I mean, we've seen how my logger behaved with Comcast. Now let's see how it does again. Let's see how it does with the Cox Communications logger. Let's see how it does that. And also some other things too. Let's see. One of the assignments actually involved. One of those assignments involved the assignments that my class today actually involved GitHub, which is where our clean copy of which is the clean copy of this new Weather HDS thing, was being hosted. So, yeah, well, basically all the files and everything for it, as well as the Asmara logger that we use. And soon after I finished it, I actually found out that somebody else on the platform was nice enough to bring over all the files from Asmara, since the original creator of it no longer maintains it. So pretty much that's just that's just there as an archive. So pretty much this thing is not going to be updated anymore. So I mean, there aren't going to be any more updates. So pretty much whatever bugs there are in the software, they are not going to be fixed. So, but that is good to know that the Asmara thing is still there. And I've also been able to find a few. And also, I've been searching through the platform, and I've been exploring some possibilities to potentially, maybe, finally bring the reality of actually running a scheduled test on WPLD IP radio. That could be something we may end up doing at some point down the line. But of course, I'm going to look through everything and explore the possibilities, and then I'll determine from there. So, really, that's really that. But again, I've been thinking about bringing an automated test. Well, I mean, on the Asmara thing, by default, I don't think there's a way to set an automated test up. And with seasonal weather, I found out it's actually kind of difficult to actually, run all the way. Well, all to properly run, because, I mean, but, yeah, so, unfortunately, as for seasonal weather, it's a pass. But, again, I'll keep watching over that as it's being updated, and maybe I'll see if a tutorial eventually, or maybe some sort of intro video or something like that, ends up going up, regarding this new thing. I mean, it would be nice though. It really would be nice, because I really would like to, have that as like a secondary source, for alert products. In fact, I've thought about it since I first saw it on Southern PAWX's weekly test stream from when was it? I think it was from the time change. Yeah, it was from the time change. He got the last Eastern Standard Time reading on that thing before the clocks flipped over. And then, so that's the only thing really that has an automated test set up. But then and in fact on that thing I could actually initiate things manually on there. So initiating things manually. Now that's actually something I could. I could technically do. That is something I could technically set up. But in fact, I will take a look and explore my options. So I'll take a look and explore my options, and maybe see if I can change that Cal voice to maybe like the Paul voice or something. And maybe it might end up behaving better. It could end up behaving better, but like I said, I am exploring new potentials in. I am, of course, exploring opportunities in improving WPLD's improving the service. well, not just that, but also a few of our other services too. There was some kind of other project I was thinking of setting up on the small form factor PC, but I haven't gotten to that recently. But who knows? Maybe with this little project, I can maybe use what's left of the whatever life is left out of that 2 terabyte mechanical drive that's in there. It's a 2.5-inch drive though, so maybe I'll just make use of whatever's left of that, whatever life is left of that drive, and maybe see if I could potentially, set up this project. Well, it's just going to be a test it's just going to be a test subject, so there isn't going to be any of the there's not going to be any of the you're not going to see it on anything for that matter. But I've also been thinking it might be finally time to roll out the website, but setting up weather radio service with it is going to be quite a challenge. Yeah, it's going to be quite a challenge. But of course I will take a look and explore possibilities and see what other kind of ways I could, other ways I can expand upon and improve the service. So yeah, because I'm always exploring new possibilities, because we still need to get our act together here. I still have a few stations I need to remove from these weekly test documents, because a lot of them have either stopped streaming alerts or have stopped doing the automated test altogether. Yeah, or have stopped doing their automated tests altogether. And that, and probably need to add more to those documents based on new oh my gosh, I haven't even checked the automated test document on the GWES's website. It's probably been a long time since it's last been updated, so I probably am going to have to take a look at that. But as I've just said, I of course will be exploring new opportunities. Yeah, of course I'll be exploring new opportunities. And then I'll kind of talk a little bit about, my findings and, on the GitHub platform, and what I plan to do with some of these things here. But yeah, it's disappointing that Brandon is not able to join us tonight for Deal or No Deal, but I understand. He's got things to do tonight, and we're going to take care of something else really fast here before we get to Yahtzee. Well, I think I just saw the definition of very quickly, as in like 5 minutes. Okay, and so with that, we are ready to transition into our final game of the night of this show, which of course is Yahtzee. So let's go ahead and get to it. As I've stated already, I will not be back to taping this show until... Yeah, we're already sounding difficult, but it's not going to be that way for long, though, because as I've said, I'm going to get back to production on the show by Friday. Friday at the very least, which is what I am hoping for. Alright, so since this is the final game of the night, I think I mentioned everything I wanted to say, but... So for those who missed the first part of the show, I'll go ahead and restate everything that's progressed on this show. The show today from start to finish. Yeah, from start to finish. So, as you all know, Monday was the final day. Well, Monday was actually D-Day for Weather Radio Canada. As at 11 a.m. Central Time, noon Eastern, and 11 a.m. and you know, in all other subsequent time zones of the country. That is when Environment Canada ended up sending out one final alert, a administrative message over Weather Radio Canada, officially signaling the end. Officially signaling the end of Canadian radio history. And even before this, and I've even mentioned it at the top of the show too, that upon the initial announcement about the discontinuation of the service, I'm sure many people who rely on these weather radio towers for emergency information, they're going to be without an alternative method of receiving alerts, because the government thinks that cell phones are enough. But in reality, it's not. Because what if the cell tower gets knocked down? What if the power goes out? Well, that's why No Weather Radio exists. That's why we have a 162 megahertz emergency frequency. That's why No Weather Radio exists. It's an alternative backbone. It's I believe the official term is analog backbone, but yeah, same thing. And over the past decade, the Weather Radio network here in the United States has been not only expanded, but also modernized. They replaced the outdated BMH system with the outdated CRS system. Okay, I'm going in the wrong order here. I meant to say they replaced the outdated CRS system in 2016 with brand new, at the time, BMH systems, which along with it came with a whole new voice that replaces a multitude of voices. There used to be like 3 voices on No Weather Radio, and now there's just one. And now there's just one voice. And then a few years after that, my office in Chicago, was actually one of the first offices to test out a wireless-to-wireless system, which ended up replacing the analog phone lines in the years that followed. So, as No Weather Radio was being maintained and expanded, and also being heavily promoted here in the United States, Canada, on the other hand, did not. Well, Canada, on the other hand, did the complete opposite. While they did eventually replace their outdated AVPAD system to iNotify, that came 2 years after the United States did their. Well, actually, that came 2 years after the wireless-to-wireless project was introduced. And Plano and Rockford, I believe, were the two transmitters that this little project of sorts was tested on. And it was actually a success, so much so that it was actually rolled out to the rest of the NOAA Weather Radio All Hazards network. So now, I believe almost every transmitter on every NOAA Weather Radio transmitter now in the United States uses this wireless-to-wireless technology. And in fact, the voices are much clearer. The quality is so much clearer now. Much clearer than it was before. But of course, the transmitters still run on analog. I mean, well, they almost still run on analog, but I guess with the analog phone lines being converted over to a wireless-to-wireless system, that pretty much, was what was needed to modernize the All Hazards network here in the United States. So while it didn't take Canada until 2021 to expand to iNotify, to upgrade to the new iNotify system, even with that, they were still discontinuing. They were still decommissioning individual transmitters. They were discontinuing transmitters by the bunch. I remember that one year Edmonton was going to be one of the transmitters to be discontinued. There was actually supposed to be another one too. Yeah, I believe it was just Edmonton. There could have been more, but I think Edmonton was one of the. I believe that was one of the only ones. And then just recently, they were going to shut down 48 other transmitters. And then that led us to February 23rd, where they said, you know what, we can't maintain this stuff anymore, so we're just gonna go ahead and put it out of its misery, and move on. But of course, what those people don't know is that it is an essential lifeline for Canadians. But at the same time, it does have its limitations, because while Weather Radio Canada did utilize the same system, like here in the States, the TV and radio stations do not utilize the same technology. The specific area message encoding technology, like radio and TV stations do here in the United States. In fact, I could take a pretty good example, because when there was that PDS tornado warning in Indiana, WCIU TV ended up relaying that ended up rebroadcasting the message directly from NOAA Weather Radio. So an index somewhere at the transmitter site or wherever must have received the warning, and it ended up going through WCIU. And it was actually in the middle of the perfect line. In fact, it went through twice. Well, 2 separate times. There were for 2 separate warnings. The first was during a commercial break of Flipside. In fact, near the end of one of the commercial breaks. And then the other time was in the middle of the perfect line. So that's something that Canada doesn't do, and that's why the National Weather Service here in the United States maintains these emergency frequencies, these transmitters, so that way TV and radio stations can receive this critical information. But with Canada, their TV and radio stations again don't utilize the specific area message encoding technology. They don't utilize that like we do here in the States. It's just one dedicated tone, and it's just one dedicated tone to let you know that an emergency broadcast is going to be made over Alert Ready. So that's really what Alert Ready is. That's really what the alerting system is in Canada by default. So maybe if the U.S. ended up stepping in to provide assistance with, the transmitter service, then maybe they wouldn't have made the shutdown announcement, or maybe they maybe could have taken that back and maybe kept the service going. Considering how essential the lifeline is. I mean, I've seen the petition that was made to stop the shutdown, but I do appreciate the petition. I'm pretty sure a lot of people do appreciate the petitions that were made, to try and stop the shutdown from occurring, but in the end, it didn't work. I think I heard there was supposed to be one, I believe I did hear that. There was one more petition or something that was going to be made. Yeah, that was going to be made, but I don't think I've heard from it since. And also, Canada WX ended up getting the ended up using DC again for something. But this time he actually ended up having his radios activate for the DC weekly off of KHB 36. And I wonder if it was him that made that update community post or something about it. But I want to take a look here. So that was the DC test. So it was actually in the BC ham radio group. So the It was actually a repost from the No Weather Radio and Weather Radio Canada group. So yeah, I mean, this is actually a pretty interesting setup, and I actually do like this setup. You know, it's a. This is very This is very clever and creative. You know, to keep those radios going. You know, for the foreseeable future. Now that Canada likely doesn't have. Yeah, there was someone that was going to bring that the shutdown to the attention of the House of Commons from that repost that I've seen. It's been about 10 days since that. Let's see, was it 10 days? Well, yeah, I think it was somewhere around there, but there hasn't been. I don't think I have heard anything. I have not heard anything. I haven't heard anything regarding that as of this moment. As of this moment, I haven't heard of anything. I haven't heard about anything of that nature as to what's going to end up happening then. Okay. Now, getting back on topic with the show here, from part one, well, from everything up to this point. So, how was the first weekly test Wednesday without Weather Radio Canada? Well, actually, it still felt kind of normal. In fact, in some way, I think this actually brings me back to. I think this actually brings me back to a time. Can't remember what time. I think it was like 2019 or so. Well, somewhere around there, when I started getting all these weekly tests across the country. Yeah, I think it was 2019 because that's when I actually started. That's when I actually started capturing these things. So yeah, it was actually 2019 when I started capturing weather alerts and stuff. But of course, we had just. In fact, I had just released those from. I had just released those from my little so-called vault. You know, that contained all those older. And basically, I put those all into a little compilation. So pretty much, it was that little 40-episode mini-series over the summer that would lead into the beginnings of Fifth Grader. And of course, its first season ends in May, and then we go into season 2. It'll only run for the first half of that, and then after that season is done, it's over. And then of course, its replacement will begin in a very similar fashion. So, well, I did say about Deal or No Deal Jackpot, that will end up taking its place. And then, well, temporarily, then of course, Play 9 will have its second season. And then, after that second season finishes in August, that is when Fifth Grader's permanent replacement will begin airing. Actually, I'm going to go take care of one more thing here for just a moment, and then we will wrap things up. Okay, so that's been taken care of. I see Northeast Illinois is still catching up on everything from the 10th. So that being one of the tornado warnings and everything that were issued, well, during that event. All right, so back to where I was. I was talking about how the show had played out up to this point. Yeah, that's where I was. So, let's see. Yeah, so we were able to get through everything, all the main weeklies and such. However, there were 3 that did not go. As far as I know, let's see. Melbourne never went, as far as I know. Boston, I don't know if that ever went, because there was no visual confirmation from Chevy AS, and maybe the stream that I and John had in their respective loggers, that was not working. So as a result, that leads me to believe that maybe Boston might have tested while those streams were offline. Maybe I should put in some other Boston stations. Well, in fact, I don't think Boston even tested at all, because I didn't see Hartford, Connecticut relay either. Because I know he has Hartford in his Mass NWR, so I know that one would have received it. So yeah, that tells me Boston didn't test. For some reason, Brownsville didn't even test either. But other than that, I mean, we were able to get through all the weeklies, perfectly, without Weather Radio Canada. But hey, at least in some way, my station is gonna hopefully breathe a little. Hopefully, it's gonna breathe a little easier now that we are. It's breathing a little easier now that we are. Now that we've removed Weather Radio Canada from my station. In fact, we had Weather Radio Canada as part of the logger for, since we started it in 2024. But, I mean, having to get rid of it now, with the shutdown, that is disappointing. In fact, I have WSPX on here. I have Radio Frenzy's new station. So basically, those are alternate sources now. So that's actually good if I don't put much stuff in there. But that only depends if their respective operators are available to even relay stuff, because they're not done automatically like my station does. They're not done automatically. They actually have to send them out manually, which actually is the case. Okay, so going back now so we did all the weeklies, and I actually ended up experimenting with the SDR a little bit more. What I'm going to do with the SDR tonight is earlier on in the show, in fact, even before the Eastern Seaboard came up, I ended up seeing how my SDR thing would behave with the secluded Fox Comcast logger. So I was thinking, why don't I try that and, just see how well it behaves. So I was thinking, let's give it a try, see how it goes. And it actually worked. My logger actually took the Comcast things properly. But now I was thinking tonight, let's try it with Cox Communications. Let's see how it handles the Cox messages. So maybe someday we could set up a special, maybe embed Comcast into our logger possibly at some point in the future. Well, I mean the videos themselves, but just having a URL in there is probably just not going to do anything. But who knows? I could try. Maybe it'll work. It probably won't. But that could be something I could try. But I just have a feeling it's not going to work. But I don't want to try it on the primary. I'll probably just, give it a try on the secondary before rolling it out to the primary, because that's the reason why I have the secondary in the first place. So yeah, we got through almost all the weeklies, perfectly today. Oh yeah, I just remembered Seattle. I don't think tested either. I just remembered, but I'm gonna assume they tested while the streams were offline. So I'm not gonna say too much else about that. Otherwise. And of course, we did Wheel of Fortune, we did Hyperbole, we did Monopoly, and then we had Tom and Ben play around with some of the Weather Radio Canada messages. Some from the old system, in fact, majority of which from the old system. Plus, well, we haven't done the service discontinuation messages yet, but I did try it earlier, but I didn't like the result. So, and then I ended up trying out a sample from our Friday show last week. That one great moment from one of the duels with Kaiba. That was great. And then, of course, we took that break from my evening class and everything like that. And then, after getting the assignments done for that class, tonight I ended up, of course, I found out that the Ismar logger is actually still being hosted on GitHub, but someone else actually is hosting it now. So that's actually great news that someone else is keeping the Ismar project alive. However, it's not being updated anymore, but he's just keeping it available. If people want to, set up an IP radio station of their own, like I have, then that would be a great option. Or if I somehow lose the original files, or my original Windows subsystem for Linux backup as it fetched, so I don't have to go through the install process again if I need to reinstall the operating system on any of my PCs, then I can just go through the reinstallation, reinstall the subsystem for Linux, and then just import the backup of everything, and then everything's going to be right there. So that's so I don't have to go through another 2-3 hours of setup all over again just because I didn't back things up. And that's good. Unfortunately, Brandon did not join us for Deal or No Deal this week, so tonight. So there will not be a new Deal or No Deal episode this week, but that's all right. He's busy with things and whatnot. Oh yeah, and one more thing. Ohio also did their severe weather awareness week drill today. The monthly test sent out by the Ohio State Emergency Operations Center in Columbus, Ohio. They sent out the monthly test message, and then NWS did their test message over NWR about 5 minutes after the Ohio Emergency Operations Center. So Cleveland might have finally gotten the memo and did not run a second test at 11 a.m. However, Pittsburgh ended up doing their test because their majority of their coverage is Pennsylvania and West Virginia. But there were only very few counties in Ohio. Wilmington actually still ended up testing their entire coverage area instead of just Kentucky and Indiana. Well, yeah, because they serve Kentucky and Indiana. Kentucky's drill was a few weeks ago. Indiana's drill was last week. So, yeah, Indiana's drill was last week. So, that's why Wilmington ended up doing the weekly test for their entire coverage area, despite the drill. Interestingly enough, Charleston, West Virginia, also did not choose to do a second test because of the drill. Or it could have been of something else. But if they end up making it up today, oh well. Then I'm not going to bother waiting. Yeah, then I'm not going to bother waiting at all. So, that's my thing. That's my plan. And, so I think that's that. Oh, yeah, and Michigan also did their drill at noon today. Brian Schlipp got the drill, but the Lembine also got the drill as well. He got it over his little SDR receiver thing. Of course, he doesn't have any of those NOAA weather alert radios like I do. So that's why there was just the message and nothing, just the broadcast and nothing more. So that was great that he actually ended up getting the test message. In fact, I found the notification. I got the notification that he got the drill while I was having my lunch break. Yeah, while I was on my lunch break, and then of course soon after I came back, he told me he had uploaded it, but I forgot to say that I had already seen it. And yeah, in fact, I did. And I'm pretty sure he has a busy day ahead of him tomorrow. And certainly I do as well. Because tomorrow is going to be the beginning of the second half of, my other class for the second half of the spring semester. Yeah, for the second half of my spring semester. But I also stated that tomorrow I would like to record the final 25 episodes to complete the Ticket to Ride series. That'll make up the entire Ticket to Ride series. So after I get those 25 episodes made, then what I'll do is I'll catch up on my shows. Some of the shows that aired. The remainder of the shows that aired during spring break. Let's see. All I have left then are the 2 episodes of The Perfect Line. The episode Scrambled Up that's going to air tomorrow morning. The Hollywood Squares on CBS that aired earlier tonight. As well as tonight's Flip Side and The Perfect Line. So I'll get all of those taken care of tomorrow after I get Ticket to Ride finished. So I will actually be able to do a majority of the episodes in the morning. As you know, I'll just get up, do my morning routine, and then get to taping the episodes pretty much immediately. Yeah, and then immediately get to work taping the episodes. So I've been able to get 20 episodes recorded just within a 4-hour time span. So pretty much then I would only need to record 5 more, following my lunch break. So then following my lunch break, I can just record the final 5 episodes and then be done with it. So then I can just get to catching up on the shows after that. So then, of course, I'll move on to, as I said, all those shows that I had just mentioned. But, of course, with tomorrow night being Backyard Baseball night, we're going to be starting it much later than we usually do. Although, considering that I'm going to be catching up on my shows, I was thinking we might actually end up doing Backyard Baseball earlier this week. Yeah, we might actually end up doing Backyard Baseball earlier this week, considering that I'm going to be finishing up Ticket to Ride prior to my, lunch break. So I was thinking maybe by 3 p.m., as early as it may seem, 3 p.m. is when I'm thinking about, doing Backyard Baseball. So I was thinking, let's get Backyard Baseball taken care of. Just get it out of the way, because I don't know how long this new class or whatever is going to be. It's probably going to be like 2 hours. It's probably going to be like 3 hours or something. And I don't want to be all stressed out, by the time it's done, because I found out there's going to be like a gazillion assignments afterward. So that's what I'm thinking. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to do Backyard Baseball at 3 p.m. tomorrow. That's what we're gonna try and do. We'll do Backyard Baseball at 3 p.m. tomorrow afternoon, 3 p.m. That's when we're gonna start Backyard Baseball, if I remember. And that also reminds me, I need to change the time of the new program showcase if that's what I'm considering. So let me make sure. So in fact, if that's what I'm going to do, I'm going to change the time of the new program showcase airing, to reflect the change. So because we have been doing it, like late, like 9 p.m. or so. I was thinking let's try it sooner. So, because I just want to try it out, see what will work best. Just see if we can do backyard baseball sooner, and then depending on what kind of stuff I have after my evening class that night, then I can maybe just come back home, take care of my other shows, and then watch the Showcase Beatdown live stream, and then just go to bed. So yeah, that's what we're gonna try tomorrow, and then if it works, we'll do it at that time slot. But if it doesn't work, then or maybe next week. But I guess we'll see what happens next Thursday when I finish Yahtzee, and then I'll decide from there. But right now, 3 p.m. is what we're going to try for tomorrow. So I'm hoping that works. So that's what we'll do. So we'll start backyard baseball at 3 p.m. tomorrow. And of course, I'll go to my evening class that night. And then Friday, I'll be taping. I'll be getting started with Yahtzee. Yeah, I'll get started with Yahtzee. And then on, let's see. And then, of course, we'll do the Fun Night show that night. And then Saturday, we'll see what happens. And then Sunday, we'll see what happens. But I do know for sure we're going to continue working on that Minecraft project. And then, of course, Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday of next week, I'll be taping episodes of Yahtzee. And then, of course, Monday, there won't be a stream. Tuesday will be our next Roblox show. However, I was thinking about adding possibly a second Minecraft show, as such, shortening Roblox to the arcade only, and doing it on Saturday, like we have been doing for the first half. For the first half of the spring taping of the spring season. Technically, yeah, spring season. But we'll try everything. We'll see if it works. If it works, it works, and we'll just see what happens. So yeah, that's really what is to come then. But with that said, we are pretty much out of time here. But of course, before we go, I of course have to do. Of course, I've got several things to take care of. The first is to say goodnight to the Tom Ben News thing. Oh yeah, we've been having so much fun with it today, and of course, I look forward to having them back here. When we do this again next week. So I say goodnight to them both. And then the next thing, of course, thanking all of our special guests who have joined us today. Let's see. Andrew Durnok was with us. Brian Schlick was with us. Dimitri was with us very briefly. Austin Vance was with us briefly too. Eastern Colorado actually joined in, toward the end of the main half. But yeah, it was those guys who participated, with us. Well, not in the show itself, but even just joining the VC, my server, for even for a few minutes or whatnot, taking some time out, just seeing what's going on with us. But of course, it's always nice when we have guests, on our show and whatnot. And then, of course, the final thing to do before we go off the air is to thank each and every one of you for joining us here tonight for the show that will pretty much define for this week's episode that will define the future of this show. It's going to be a weekly test Wednesday without Weather Radio Canada, and that probably will be the case going forward, unless Environment Canada ends up changing their mind from all the backlash before they even turn the transmitters off. So, who knows? We will have to wait and see. But again, thank you all so much for joining us here today for another exciting weekly Test Wednesday extravaganza. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did. And we will be back with you again tomorrow afternoon at 3 p.m. Yes, 3 p.m. As I stated earlier, for our backyard baseball live stream. So that's what we got coming up for you tomorrow, and we hope you will join us again for that. But until then, I'm Mr. Planfald, and we wish all of you a very pleasant good night.